I just didn't know where you wanted to go next, but I was going to briefly just summarize a couple of things we said because I'm still on the lookout for best practices that you guys have been mentioning. So kind of the three solutions that I've seen and that I've heard you guys talk about in response to good ordering are, one, the GM does all of it, and that's like kind of the Apocalypse World solution. And we've explored reasons why that does or doesn't work. And I think that works very well for some games and probably not at all for other games.
That footnote "and works well for some games" is just going to have to be appended onto everything they say, right? Because of all the other mechanics coming in and which variables are most valuable. In Apocalypse World, personal energy reserve doesn't mean shit. In Circle of Hands, it means everything. So, yeah.
So may I?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in Apocalypse World, we are not competing with time or space or people. It's essentially we want to know what will happen. But if we are, if the game asks us how good are we, then GM decides or GM tells us is not a way to measure our success.
I think that the logic of conflict of interest is a really good logic, because we're not talking about the intention of the GM, who may have a very, very good intention. They may be doing their absolute best. But just as it's not possible to trust a scientist who's being paid by the company to do the research, even if the scientist really wants to be objective about this, we know they can't be. And in science, what you do is you simply have to be upfront. You simply have to say, I was being paid. And everybody can just make their choices about your integrity or the integrity of the study after that. But in terms of role-playing, even if the GM has, or the person who's been assigned the ordering, even if they've been given everybody's trust, there's an edgy feel to it sometimes. I think if other variables were somehow involved that are going to factor in that we can refer to, then maybe it's not so bad. But
I think it's also.
Yeah, sorry, Herman. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also when I look at games like Apocalypse World or Dungeon World, it's like we're telling a story together. You take turns talking and telling that story, and you take the beats of the story and you try to keep that in mind. While if you take, say, like 4th edition D&D, it's almost a tactical miniatures game, in which combat has a. In my experience, it tended to be. It tended to move that way more than, say, Dungeon World or Apocalypse World.
Well, maybe so. I kind of wanted to avoid the creative agenda aspect of this, because I will I will fall into the camp of saying that small-scale strategy, as an advocate of one's character, is not in and of itself a creative agenda. It's a form of investment.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's, just because I'm really worried about my movement units and whether I can get my attack in, that doesn't mean I'm playing gamist. It just means that I'm invested, in my character's integrity and the situation. So it's a dangerous hole to go into, to start thinking in terms of what we're. But you are right that the units of contributing what a character does come in different languages.
Yeah, and also the game text is puts more and more focus on the one thing or the other. The
Right.
4th edition game text really points to, okay, these are the minutiae of playing a combat, playing the game, while Dungeon World, for example, keeps it more loose and fluent and doesn't put the focus there. So you have to get your game text, which
arguably is in the sort of loose camp, and in particular, the narration of the outcome is very much, and is also the narration of how you did it. You start saying how you do it, but you know you're not going to really be able to say how you did it until you know whether it went well or badly.
Yeah.
But I tend to find that Trollbabe has no ambiguity at all. Whereas, bluntly, I find Apocalypse World's ambiguous window is too big for me. Or Monster Hearts in particular, I found that was way too big for me. And that you can say, oh, it's all about the story, oh, it's all about the beats, but often that language is an excuse for just having crap design. We're all supposed to pretend it's not crap and agree that it was okay. And so, I mean, I can be pretty blunt about this. I think a lot of these games are getting really, really too comfortable in being hip and casual in their their textbook language, and their game language, as sort of saying it's okay to have crap design, which is not.
I am going to suggest that some of the Apocalypse World ones de facto work in what I imagine Zach is going to describe as one of the three approaches, which is you roll the dice and then you work out the ordering backwards from that, and you actually do that in functional ways of running something like Master Apocalypse.
Yeah.
But it's less defined and more ad hoc and more subject to
Clay
or
that
somebody.
does that too.
Which one?
Clay that Woke does that.
Right, absolutely. Clay That Woke is an excellent example.
But I think
and I think that's functional.
We're talking here. You said okay, it's crappy design, but as I was running different games, like I ran Torchbearer, I ran Circle of Hands, I ran Clay That Woke too. And I found out, and Apocalypse World I'm running right now, so I found that it doesn't matter what the rules say. If I want, I can impose my will as GM. I can take as much authority as I want, and there is enough space for me to I don't know, to use this gray area for whatever. And I don't think the design is possible to fix this. Like in Trollbabe, if I lose, I can take a bit. I can try to make my ending or winning a little better or a bit less than it's supposed to be. It's a mistake, but not as bad as it could be. But also, otherwise, like as a GM, I can say, okay, yes, you fought him and you killed him, but those other people are afraid of you and scared before you, and I can take all the joy from winning from the player.
I think that's an important point. I sort of hoped that in both Trollbabe and Circle of Hands that the mechanically mandated outcomes have to be honored enough that all those things become constructive rather than overturning, the result. I was more interested in what you were saying in terms of going into the resolution rather than coming out of it, which was that, for example, in the Clay That Woke, if the player playing the Minotaur is in a dialogue situation, and I, for whatever reason, after it's clear that we're going to the resolution system, then I decide, you know what, this guy's holding a knife behind his back, so I'm going to put in some skull tokens too. Even though, according to everything that everybody knew, we were just talking. And so if I use the logic of what everybody knew and understood, then I should just put in stop tokens, no skulls.
Yes.
But I have just decided secretly, he's got a knife behind his back, so it's possible that you could get hurt. So I'm going to put it in there. Now, you see, how much by the rules is that, or how much is that freedom that you actually have, is a very good question. And it seems to me when I play the Clay That Woke, I make a personal decision about how far I allow myself to go. But that's not a good rule, right? It's not a good rule to say that that's the rule.
So you asked me before about crappy design from Apocalypse World, but this problem would be fixed in Apocalypse World by the principles and agenda. Like, you're supposed to abide by the rules to do what honesty demands,
Right.
and what rules demands. So if you show that you're just talking, it would be not okay to bring a knife into
Right.
this situation.
I completely agree that that's the case for Apocalypse World.
Or if I make a front that this guy is posing as a friendly guy, but really he's got a secret agenda, then it would be okay to bring the knife, even if I didn't foreshadow it to the players. So
I agree about that, and we also need to honor hidden information, right? We need to honor that as a technique. That's true.
And it's kind of similar in Clay That Woke, I think. And that was something that like. You have this hidden truth and possible truths.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we are kind of improvising during the game, right?
A little bit, yes, but it's true that we have. But I completely agree that I'm not necessarily saying that bringing in the knife was a bad thing to do. What I'm saying is whether
it's honest
whether and how there are standards for doing that. Can you just do it anytime, or are there standards for doing that? It's one of the things I've talked about in terms of hard preparation. When I play the Clay That Woke, what I try to do, and again, I don't think it's safe as a rule, but I think I try to do it to compensate, which is whatever it is that I have going into a given scene, I pretend that I prepared it 3 weeks ago and it's in my notebook.
Okay.
Right, I pretend that it is rock solid, and once we launch into the scene, I'm not going to let myself re-prep it.
Okay.
You know? And I just have this kind of point where I say, all right, no matter what, for the next instances of play, I'm not making up anything new.
It's what
I think
Vincent says about
that subject is worth its own its own thing. And so
we've gotten a little afield.
Yeah, sorry. All right, that's true, but it's fascinating, and it matters though, because you see, it also means what do you do when you have hidden, secret, triggered actions on the part of NPCs, right? I mean, it's relevant because of that.
Yeah, it would be like this guy is in shadow. It's kind of similar thing. So you haven't seen it. I rolled your perception behind the screen, and suddenly like he hits you, and you don't roll for initiative.
Right.
Right. But it kind of it feels as cheating because.
I never feel cheated like that. You sort of have faith that the GM did it, even though there are whole textbooks telling the GM he can cheat whenever he wants to.
Yeah, I would feel cheated anyway.
It's like, oh God, what? Thanks.
Anyway, Zach, you were listing some.
Yeah, so just the three solutions that we've been talking about are, one, the GM does it, and there's a whole universe of things to say about that, and the GM can definitely abuse or fiat or whatever, and those are dangers that come with this kind of system. But I also don't think Apocalypse World is non-functional. I think it's very functional, and maybe that requires some buy-in from people in a certain kind of group, and you talked about more extroverted people and this and that, and those are things you can overcome. The second one, I'm glad somebody brought up My Life with Master, and I think Troll Babe and I think even Riddle of Steel fall into this solution, which is the kind of spotlight solution. We're just going to put the spotlight on you, and a lot of times I see large consequences get resolved with a single roll.
Right.
Or like a single series of rolls, and it's not as fine-grained.
So consequential in terms of their outcome, like Riddle of Steel, you chop his head off, right? Or because the roll just is that big, like in Troll Babe. It just can do it. Yeah. Right.
And so the spotlight roll, and like I can include Cold Soldier in this too,
absolutely.
even though there aren't rolls. It's just like when you're playing, so that solution also sort of sidesteps the ordering issue by just saying, hey, everyone's going to take a turn, and it's not going to be unfair because the things you're rolling for are not as fine-grained that we need to know exactly
you can set
who
order to make it work. Tunnels and Trolls, this goes all the way back to Tunnels and Trolls in 1975. We're just going to roll the outcome of this particular clash, and we'll just make that work.
And then the third way that I've seen this done and that we've talked about is really the sorcerer way, which is where you say, yes, we want to do fine-grained stuff, but we're going to roll ordering and effectiveness into the same stat and equivocate them, and then that's going to be very punchy and very important.
But then you have to have responsivity.
Correct. Right. So on the topic of responsivity, a best practice thing that I heard you guys say that jumped out to me was we like randomness in the ordering situation. It creates a special excitement. Yeah. It's got to be somewhere. It's got to be exciting. Ron has previously used the analogy of playing baseball with a wet rag. You want some bounce, all that kind of stuff. And however, we want choices. We don't want to feel powerless. And I think the sort of response...
the stop motion thing is the worst. Right? That's
absolutely the worst. Right. So that's a least practice, right? Not a best practice. Right. And so the note I made was, it seems like a suggestion for best practice or something resembling it in games where you don't want it to be GM fiat for good or for worse. You do want it to be more fine-grained. Is you have some kind of choice about your stance or your orientation or your general intention. Then you have randomness, and then you have reasonable responses to the randomness that's occurred so you don't feel powerless. And the analogy I would give is card games. So I don't know, I play a lot of card games. I play traditional card games. I play Magic the Gathering. And what's really satisfying about card games is making a choice, having some random feedback, and then looking at your hand and going, okay, how do I win from here?
Right.
And having real choices that follow from that.